welcome to the Vet Files. Today we're joined by Dr. Emily King, and we're so excited to talk to her today. She is the founder of All Star Veterinary Clinic, and if you haven't seen her on social media, go check her out. What is your username, Dr. King?
Dr. Emily King. It's really hard.
Yeah, so hard. Just, try to sound that one out and go
Yes,
check her out on
exactly.
Instagram and all of the different platforms. We love watching her content and thought we would have a chat today. So, Dr. King, could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, thanks for having me, you two. I'm excited to revisit, a couple of the topics and talk tonight. So thanks for having me. Basically, so you want to know how I got to where I am currently. Well, I went to undergraduate school at James Madison University. And I played basketball in college. And then I went from there to the University of Tennessee and graduated in 1996. So this is 30 years, woo, in May of since graduation. We were visiting briefly before the podcast, and I was saying I think I had like 56, 57 people, 58, something like that in my graduating class. So I'm sure everyone is going to be celebrating in May that we've made it 30 years. So yeah, that's kind of, never knew I was going to do small animal medicine. Originally had plans to do marine mammal medicine, and then figured out that no, I was not going to do that. So I needed to figure out something else to do with my degree, and that was small animal medicine. So yeah, a non-traditional route to where I currently am.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've told that story. I know you told us on APVMA about a million times, but just
Yeah.
for those who didn't know, I think talking about everybody's journey when they come on is really cool. Everybody's is genuinely so different. Every single person we've talked to has had some different variation, even if you all end up in small animal medicine, which is the more common route. Everybody has such an interesting story of how they got there. So, what would you say is the best part of founding a clinic and kind of running your own show?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great things, right? I think when you own your own clinic, the good things far outweigh the bad things that come from owning your own business. That's something that we preach to not only, our own children, being an entrepreneur and owning something, is a way to financial stability, but also it's a unique way to live. We also talk to the people inside the clinic about that. Like, hey, listen, if you have ownership, interests, whether it be with veterinary medicine or something else, we have one doctor who her husband and her own another business that she's also running. And so, it's a fun way to live. It's a fun way to exist as a professional, if you will. And so, yeah, I think I wandered off on a tangent, so I don't remember the original question. But I think it's definitely worth owning your own business. The pros definitely outweigh the cons.
What are those learning curves? Because, Gretel and I had been talking about this, but I was talking about maybe getting an MBA or something in the hopes of owning a practice one day. And that's just one of those things where I'm like, are the skills gained from a degree and all the paperwork and the schoolwork the same as the skills that you're going to earn from just going in, diving in head first and figuring it out? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite part of being an owner is autonomy, right? It is your thing. You're deciding what's happening and the direction it's going. Like, it is, the buck stops with you. Like, it is either as pretty as you want it to be or as ugly as you let it be, right? So I think that's the cool part and the challenging part. There's no way on this planet that I would have been able to run All Star Veterinary Clinic from a business perspective. That was not something that I'm going to even pretend to be talented about. Like, I understood just enough, so my husband had an MBA and a law degree and had a degree in finance. And so he ran the whole business side of the practice. If he had not been there, I would have absolutely needed some form of other education, because back when I was in school, they really didn't have a ton of business classes. They had a few that you could take as an elective, but it wasn't a focus like it is now. And so definitely having some additional training in terms of what does it look like to run a business? What should you be focused on? Are important assets that I would acquire for sure if it was me.
That's amazing. I can understand. I was pointing to myself during that because I have no business skill whatsoever. I wish I didn't have to charge a dime to anyone, but that's not realistic.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I'd give away the farm if it was possible, right? I mean, it's just one of those things. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I'd love to hear about it. So you were talking about autonomy. When you came to University of Illinois, you spoke about your favorite books and how you constantly use like your standards in your clinic for when things get crazy. One of my favorite memories is when you spoke about the first patient of the day still gets treated the same as the last patient. Could you describe an experience where you felt you had to instill those values? What made you set up this organization for your own clinic?
I'm for better or for worse, like I worry what people think. And so which is not necessarily like a great trait to have, right? So like for better or for worse, that's not the best trait, right? I mean, because it creates a lot of stress and anxiety if you're constantly worried about what the next person is thinking or what your client's always thinking. That's important, and that's what drove me to create processes a certain way, because I wanted to be the best, and I was very competitive, and so then therefore when they left, I wanted them telling their neighbor about us, or if they saw somebody in church and they were talking about how their pet was treated, then I wanted it to be a certain way. And so that was my initial motivation, behind doing it. I think that ultimately the processes and the consistency to which the processes were performed created a good work environment and ultimately pushed the clinic the direction that it needed to go. So it was a little bit by accident, but somewhat intentional. Once I figured out that that's actually what needed to be happening, then it became very intentional in terms of what we were trying to do.
I think it's a great point that Gretel brought up and that you brought up about not peer pressure, but the pressure, people pleasing, right? Like everybody, for the most part, in vet med is somewhat of an empath. You kind of have to be if you want to, work with animals and listen to what they're saying without talking, et cetera, et cetera. Just earlier, I had to make a phone call that I did not want to make to another vet, and I was like, I put it off for maybe a week or two, and I said, I do not want to do this.
That's rule number one, Michaela. You don't put it off. You do it. You do the hard thing first and then get it off your plate. You just spent a week and a half with all that hanging over your head. Oh my gosh.
I know. And now the conversation's still not over. She still has to call me back and work things out. And I'm like, oh. And I'm so scared of making or offending her or upsetting her. And it wasn't, even though I was the victim of this situation, I was like, I'm not angry at you. I'm just trying to, fix things. And so it's been difficult for me to man up and say, hey, I think something went wrong and I want to fix it. It took me a week and a half. My heart's beating out of my chest. And so that is something I struggle with. That is the scariest part. It's not even the finances and whatever. I'm more than willing to educate myself on that. It's the character building that I have to do when it comes to, having a backbone and saying no when you need to say no and having boundaries and standing up for yourself, because I think I'm pretty good at standing up for other people or for pets and etc. So I don't know. I mean, do you have any experience where you just were fighting to make yourself do something like that?
Oh my gosh. For years. Absolutely. I mean, I was like I don't know what, like a limp noodle when it came to conflict initially. I just hated it. And I wouldn't have crucial conversations with people. There was massive inconsistency from an accountability perspective, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And so, it was like, and you can feel, right, the tension and things like that. And you're like, this is not how it's supposed to be. And then you start to slowly realize that then you are the problem. And as long as you start to realize that you're the problem, then you can fix that, right? So you lead yourself first, you work on yourself first, and then you can lead other people. And so then as you start to kind of peel away the layers of the onion, you realize really how bad you actually were. And then you just vow to never be that bad again. So I think, everybody has those experiences. I would say the first, when I worked for other people, it was very easy for me to lead because I just did what was expected, and I treated people the way I would want to be treated, and I did all the things that you would think you would do. I showed up on time. I wasn't late. I didn't call in sick. I did all the things that made me valuable, and then, oh, by the way, then I could practice veterinary medicine, so it was so I was then just essentially seen as a leader. Well, that's all fine, but that doesn't translate to ownership necessarily. So then when you open a practice, you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, how do I get all these people to do the things they actually need to do? How do they learn them all, first of all? And then how do they buy into the fact that they're important? And then once they know how to do them and once they know they're important, why in the heck are they still not doing them? And then what do I need to do about that? I thought people just would do what they're supposed to do. That's just not how it works. And so then being able to learn how to do that. So yeah, I was really bad at it initially, for sure. There was definitely a gazillion. You could go ask anybody that worked for me probably the first 6 years of the clinic's life and be like, what was she like? It was a disaster. I mean, I wasn't mean or anything like that. I just motored along, but with not the same intentionality.
Yeah, and I think kind of on the same topic, something that I had been thinking about and kind of talking with my classmates, and it was a topic brought up during classes, and you don't have to say your opinion on these things, but when it comes to moral dilemmas, there's a lot of discussion about should you as a vet be doing ear cropping, tail docking, etc., etc. And again, you're welcome to share your opinion, not asking you to. But how do you stand strong and say, well, I don't believe in this, but I will do it so you don't do it at home, or do you do it at all? Like, what do you think about handling those types of situations?
Yeah, I mean, that's really difficult because you are trying to serve two different purposes. You're trying to get the client to change and do something that they're not wanting to do, right? So, like, you want them to do something different than what they originally think they want to do. And then you also are trying to manage the healthcare of the pet. So, like you mentioned, well, I don't want them to go someplace else and get something really badly done or botched done, or they themselves try to do it, or something like that. Now we have a pet who has, if I had just done it, it would have been fine, kind of a thing. And so I think that really you're not going to, in my opinion, as now that I've gotten older, I think that you genuinely are not going to change people's opinions about anything until you change their hearts. So maybe spending time. So what we try to do is focus on spending time. Why is it that you want to have this done? Because sometimes we're assuming that they're doing it for a particular reason and they're not really. It's because their neighbor said this. And then once they learn information, then they're like, oh, geez. Like I've had people come in and be like, will you amputate, the first digit on my dog's front feet? And I'm like, well, I mean, like, we can, but why do you want to do it? Well, my neighbor said that he had a hunting dog and they always tore the dew claws off, so I thought I should get him removed. And I was like, that is worse than the spay that I'm about to do, as far as discomfort for the patient, So if you want me to, we can do that and we can make your pet as comfortable as possible. But when over the next 7 days, this is what's going to bother your dog. The amputation site, not the spay site. Are you sure that's something? No, never mind. I don't want to do it. So I think just talking clients through, same thing with declaws, have you tried this? 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 And there are so many different circular conversations, right? Where people are like, well, you shouldn't declaw a cat. And, declawed cats end up in the Humane Society, or do they have, long-term pain, and that's why we shouldn't do it. And, but if you outlaw it, then our cat's going to end up in the Humane Society because owners can't keep them inside? Or now are we saying it's okay to let cats go outside because that's their natural environment, where we've been preaching all along cats should be inside? So like, are we going to now be okay with cats being outside? Because if they can't be inside because they're being destructive, then are we allowed to let them outside? Like, so I think the blanket statements are where people get themselves into trouble. And I think veterinarians in general, to some degree, have to be comfortable having the conversations in the gray zones. And not every decision is going to be right for every owner, So I do think you yourself have to be comfortable with whatever you're doing. And you should never be convinced to do something that you yourself aren't comfortable doing, because the outcome is likely to be not good, right? It's unlikely to end up positive. That's just kind of karma. So like, you should never be convinced to do something that you don't believe in.
That's amazing. Such an amazing response. I wanted to say, you started off talking about you cannot change people's opinions until they change their heart. I personally have had a very hard time with this, watching so much misinformation be spread online and people not trusting veterinarians. And it's almost like people would rather believe someone who's unqualified with a theory, with something magical that they think will fix their problem, versus someone who will go through 8 years of schooling minimum. I'd love to hear, like, what do you think causes our society to go try to find other resources than veterinarians? And how do we combat this?
Oh gosh, it's a really hard thing that's going on right now. I mean, I think that veterinarians are under fire, right? So from outside the industry, but then also inside the industry as well. I feel like there's veterinarians attacking each other, you know, people in private practice are attacking people with corporate partners. I mean, like, it's just like, I'm like, what is happening? Like, why? I don't understand. Aren't we all in this together? Like, what's going on? And so, you know, the way, in my opinion, the way you combat it is if you're in your community, anyways, certainly as a person owning a clinic, for example, you should be putting out accurate information so that your clients have accurate information coming from someone locally so that they feel like they have reliable information so that they don't have to seek out information elsewhere. But I do think it's human nature to, and the way the algorithms work on Instagram, right? They're going to keep feeding you the same thing, and there's affirmation bias that's happening. So if you believe that declaws are bad or whatever, I don't know, I'm just picking that because we just talked about it, then, and you watch something that reiterates that, that's what's going to show up. And then you're just going to continue to be fed that narrative, you know, which we all agree, no, we don't really want to be doing declaws. I'm not saying that that's what we want to be doing, but I'm just using that as an example. You're being fed that narrative over and over and over and over again. Or kibble is bad. That's a better one, right? Kibble's bad. I did that post where the guy was like, there's something more deadly in your cabinet.
I saw that. It's like,
Something
what?
more deadly in your cabinet than chocolate and grapes. And I was like, okay, I want to know what is, because those are actually deadly. And the guy was like, it ended up being like forever before I got to the answer. And it dawned on me, I'm like, oh, he's talking about kibble. And I was like, actually, as a matter of fact, no, that is not more deadly than grapes and chocolate. Like, it's crap like that, you know, and then once you watch that once, it's going to show up on your feed. Kibble's bad, kibble's bad, kibble's bad, you know. And so I think it's just human nature, unfortunately. Once you have affirmation bias or you get sucked into affirmation bias, then you're looking for things to tell you that you're right.
I think it's the whole like non-kibble food. If that's the choice you want to go, and it's you talk to a vet and et cetera, et cetera, like there's steps to be taken where maybe you could look at that, okay. But I love or hate the ads that are like, feeding your kibble is like sending your dog to jail. And I'm like, feed them.
No, let's villainize everybody that who has to, maybe
Yeah.
financially, you
I
know,
was just having this
has to feed kibble.
conversation because I'm the Hills food representative for LSU for my class. We did a small animal nutrition lab where the entire point was you went through and they took 2 bags of feed, you know, good, reputable brands. Sometimes it was Hills, sometimes it's Purina, and then sometimes it's Walmart brands. I don't know, just pick some brands. And they sat them side by side and they said, go through with this exact scenario, calculate the resting energy requirement, and then tell me A, how much of each food you would need to feed per day, and then B, which one would be better for this dog's specific scenario, because it does change. And most of the time in this scenario, the Hills was like winning. And somebody was like, I don't know why you would ever feed anything other than Hills. And I was like, because it's expensive. That doesn't mean that it's, you know, these other foods are bad. It means maybe that's what's accessible. My dogs back home get Purina and I'm the Hills rep. My cat gets Hills. Like, it's a lot of factors playing in. And so I was just having that conversation about everybody uses, you know, spectrum of care, scope of care, etc. Like, keep that in mind. I think even some of the specialists and whatnot, once we get so far removed from the clients and the people with pets and their base level understanding of things, because I didn't know as much about small animal nutrition as I do now a year ago. How would I expect, you know, the people that are walking through the door to know everything that I know without me explaining something to them?
Mm-hmm.
So connect yourself, ground yourself back. I know it happens with specialists sometimes because their clients are the vets sometimes. So then they're like, well, this is the gold standard. Why would I do anything less than the gold standard? And it's like, because that's not the gold standard for everybody's budget, for everybody's preferences. You know, that's one of the hardest parts of vet med, in my opinion, is working with people, not personality wise, but finding the right solution for everybody, because like you said earlier, it's a lot of working in gray areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about a little bit of how do you manage spectrum of care in your clinic too. So we had a practitioner come in the other day, and this will get a little sad in a moment, told us that the euthanasia cap on average is $1,000. So I've heard from some veterinarians, they say, okay, take the patient in no matter what, versus sending them to the ER where they're probably going to be euthanized or charge $2,000 to $3,000. And I keep hearing these opinions. Well, it's either preserve the veterinarians and their day and let them go home to their family, or save the clients some money. I just want to hear your approach because you've owned a clinic before.
Yeah, so our rule of thumb was we were not there on Saturdays and Sundays. Because the clients gave us that, and with very little resistance, we said if we're there, we're there. So if somebody calls at 5:55 and says their dog, I don't know, is whatever, laying on the ground and can't get up, then you were there. You come in. So we didn't turf a lot because we were willing to, and this is where spectrum of care comes in. And I think this is where things fell off the rails a little bit, right? Where we were trying to provide a certain level of care, and then we were handcuffing ourselves. So people said, you should not have a patient overnight. You don't have anybody there watching that patient. And it's like, well, I don't know, like for 15 years we did it that way. Like, it's a parvo dog. Like, we hooked it up to fluids. It's not moving. It doesn't feel so well. And then we're giving it our drugs and it's on a grate, and we're coming back in the morning and we're cleaning them up and we're doing his treatments. And whoa, there's nothing wrong with that. So why would we take that patient and turf it? And then the owner incurred $3,000. We all know an owner who has a parvo dog does not have any money. So they never do. Why? So I think things kind of started to go off the rails a little bit as you watch what was happening, where people were like saying that's not an okay method of treatment. Keeping a hospital, and I would even have applicants ask me, do you keep animals in the hospital overnight when no one's there? Like, yeah, we do surgery. Some of them stay overnight. Like, yeah, they're here, and it kind of got where people didn't want that. They don't want patients when you do that, you raise prices, you raise expenses for owners. I think my age group of veterinarian was exceptionally good at spectrum of care. And here's why. Because when we graduated, we had enough diagnostic tools within the clinic, but not excessive diagnostic tools. We really didn't have endoscopy and fluoroscopy and all these other things that a lot of people have right now, and I mean, you name it, whatever, cold laser therapy. I mean, like, it adds up, right, on the expense of all of the clinic. We didn't have all that, but we had the things that we absolutely needed. We had an in-house lab machine, right, which was our biggest tool probably. And we had an ultrasound machine. The guy was very forward thinking at the time when I graduated, and we had radiology. And so we were really good at practicing spectrum of care, and prices were what they were. They weren't excessive because we didn't have this high overhead. And so we had to learn how to guess with the tools that we had. Now you move forward through the past 30 years and people have been clamoring for better healthcare, more advanced healthcare for pets. That's all fine and dandy and human grade healthcare, but that comes with a cost and with an overhead. And so now you guys as veterinarians are having to navigate the guilt. I use that word. I don't know if that's the correct word, but the guilt of going, oh man, I have all these tools over here. I should be using them, but I can't because the person can't afford them. Where we didn't have that guilt. We didn't even have dental radiographs, wasn't even a standard of care. It was a different way of practicing. But in my opinion, it was great because we didn't have any of these issues that we have now. And so now we have human grade healthcare, and we don't have the infrastructure to support the expense of human grade healthcare within clinics for clients. And so because they're animals, I mean, it is what it is. I don't know what to, they're not people. So, does that mean people shouldn't be able to get care for their dog? No, but you're going to have to come up with some very creative ways of accomplishing that because the clinic owner cannot foot the bill. It will not work, and so what are you left with then? so encouraging people to use insurance and things like that, as now personally, I don't want insurance in our industry, a significant, I guess, heavy-handed insurance feeling in our company because in our industry, because they're going to tell us how to practice medicine. Right. There was an example of a person I know who went into a human hospital and he had a kidney stone, and they made it, the insurance made them treat him a certain way first. And when that didn't work, then they did it this other way. And he was like, why didn't you just do it that way to begin with? And he was like, because we're not allowed. I was like, oh my God, like talk about making me stab my eyes out. Can you imagine if it was like a bleeding hemoabdomen and the insurance company's like, well, give him a transfusion first and see if it stops. Can you imagine? It would be a disaster.
I have personally
experienced
that, going to the doctor and saying, I have this issue and I want this treatment, or they recommend this treatment. And then I think it took me months to find like the right medication for something because it was insurance saying, well, you haven't tried this one yet, this lower level, cheaper one, before we cover the more expensive one, the gold standard, the thing that we know will help you. But let's try the cheap one that might help you.
Right.
Exactly. Just suffer first.
Yeah.
So I think spectrum of care is so doable in veterinary medicine. I honestly, I don't mind it at all, probably because I grew up having to guess and then base my treatment changes in my treatment plan based off how the pet reacted. You know what I mean? And what happened with the pet when I chose to do this or this, and then learning when I did do that and I had a pet that looked like that, then I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do this instead. Using all of those things to kind of predict and determine how you practice medicine. That doesn't bother me at all. It doesn't bother me when somebody says, I can't do any diagnostics. I'm like, I'll guess. I'll do it. Sign me up. I don't have to interpret a lab panel now. Right? No, I'm just kidding. But okay, it's fun. And I think that we need to get back to that. That's okay. It doesn't mean you're a bad veterinarian. It doesn't mean, you just need to meet the people where they are. I think our job is to educate. Whatever they do with the information, that's up to them.
I think one of the interesting parts, I already mentioned, it's not an issue per se. It's just that when you go to a vet school where you have access to, some of the best vets in the country, some of the most trained, some of the most educated people, and the clients are coming there because they've already went to their general practitioner and chosen that they didn't have the tools needed there, and they're going to come to your school, veterinary teaching hospital, to do more. And so what I've realized a lot of times, whether talking to clients or talking to professors, blah, 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 is the things that they're doing and that are their baseline level of care would never happen or even be a thought at my home clinic in the middle of nowhere. And so one of my first questions I always ask if I have the opportunity or if it feels appropriate is if I'm getting a lecture on, maybe it's dentistry, and I say, well, what are the baseline or the gold standard, or how can we make this more accessible to rural or low-income people? Because when I think about my clinic, and it's the only vet clinic within, 30, 45-mile radius, and, I had an incident with a personal pet where it was, you have to drive 4 hours because it's Texas and the state's huge. So, you have to drive 4 hours to get this biopsy done. And it was like, okay, well, that's not going to happen. It's just an interesting topic.
You bring up a great point. I think veterinarians also need to be comfortable doing stuff. Stop sending, stuff to places that you just do the work, and it's okay if it's the first time you've done the work, or set yourself up for success by working on cadavers, start a cadaver program in your practice, and do stuff. Tell somebody, you know what? It's not practical for you to drive 4 hours down the road. If you're okay with it, I can do the biopsy for you. It's not something I routinely do, but I feel more than comfortable taking a biopsy from them out or whatever it is. I think we can save owners a lot of money, by doing things. And it also has inundated the specialty practices, which then as now you can't get into specialists for 6 or 8 weeks because they're doing stuff that GPs should be doing. So I think that, veterinarians need to, get their confidence back. And I think the schools are partly responsible for that over the past 20 years. They wanted to push work to the specialists, right? Because they've trained residents. These residents now are specialists, right? You should send that to the specialist. Well, now that we've shot ourselves in the foot because now we've just made a bunch of veterinarians who are scared to do anything. and nervous. And then they haven't done it for a year. Oh my God, how am I going to do this cherry eye? I don't know. Like that should not go to an ophthalmologist unless it's a bulldog. Then I'll give you a pass. But like even then, you could do it. So there's so many things like that. FHOs, like there's so many things that I see going to specialists that end up costing owners way more than what it needs. Specialists need to be doing compound fracture repairs and back surgeries and that like serious stuff that like we didn't learn how to do.
I think that's a great point because, like you said, the schools do kind of encourage us refer, not in a negative way, the way that it's
Right.
phrased to us. I've never even thought about what you're saying because the way it's phrased to us, the other side of the conversation, in addition to driving business to specialists, is if you don't feel comfortable doing it, there's no shame in sending it to somebody who could give your patient better quality of care. If you know or if you feel like you can't do what needs to be done, don't feel ashamed that you can't do it. Don't be overconfident and screw your patient over because you thought you could do something that you couldn't. So again, it's just another side of the conversation, but I think that's a really good point.
Well, and I think if the option is the pet's going to get euthanized, or you're going to do it, then like I think that's a conversation. We've had those conversations with owners tons of times. We had our own technician, RVT, that had her dog needed a gallbladder surgery, and it wasn't imminent, but she really did not want to go pay $8,000. But we used our cadaver program. We practiced it 3 to 4 times, Dr. Cloud and I, and then we did her gallbladder surgery. So like, I just don't think that and that's not an example of euthanasia, but I've had plenty of times where people have been like, I am going to have to euthanize it. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll try, like I'll try and save them. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do think that you have to have a certain level of skill. Like you don't want to, but most of the time when you graduate, you're working with other people. Usually you have 2 people working on things. Like if it's something that somebody's never done, usually have an extra set of hands and eyes, things like that optimize, success. We have a surgeon locally that we can just pick up the phone and either text or call and be like, we had a colonic torsion in a dog. I was like, I'm not referring this. It's a colonic torsion. We just have to like do surgery and like flip it around, right? I mean, we had never done one, but I was like, this can't be that hard. And she wasn't going to go to the specialist. And I'm like, well, all right, let's just open them up. Let's flip it over, untwist it. And then let's, figure out what we're supposed to do to keep it from doing it again. So, I mean, like just because we hadn't done it didn't mean that we weren't qualified to do it. So I think that's important for young veterinarians to understand.
Definitely. I remember I was a runner in high school, and my coach always told me that being comfortable is overrated. And I am constantly uncomfortable in veterinary school and will be for the rest of my career. And I have to live with that. And even getting people to talk in front of a room freaks out most people. I wish they would feel how we feel as veterinarians, veterinary students, veterinarians. One day, like the other day, we did physical exams for the first time. You know how nerve-wracking that was with perfectly behaved dogs?
We just had a whole comms lab that threw everybody off because we have been doing physical exams and practicing that and taking history since one of the first labs we did was a physical exam and getting used to it. But this past communications lab that we had, it was taking a history while you're doing a physical exam. So a very normal, day-to-day thing. And it just had everybody in a tizzy. And they're like, I can't do both. I can't do both. Why can't I do it separate? And I was like,
That's hilarious.
that's my class. But we were like, oh my God.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Actors for us. We were pretend doctors. And
Yes,
that's
we do that
amazing.
all the time. It's so fun.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh, I love it. Yes, I think, learning how to be decisive is extremely important, and so being decisive is a learned skill. And I think you become comfortable being decisive, not because you're going to be right every time, but because you can handle if you're wrong, right? You're going to be okay, even if you are wrong. And so I think being indecisive is a killer in our profession for sure.
Yeah. And as we round out, first off, we already talked about your Instagram. Tell us a little bit about your TV show that you're producing, I think, right?
Yeah, so Dr. Crocker and myself are doing a show. We can't say a lot about it because Harrison will kill me. And so it is a show where we are just kind of showcasing different professions within our industry and what those jobs look like, at the same time trying to do said jobs. And so it is, just trying to bring some humor again and some joy and some comedic relief, as well as some, good information for not only veterinary professionals, but for pet owners kind of around the world. And so we're excited about it. We think it's a unique idea. And hopefully over the next year, we'll get everything filmed and then we can launch it on a platform, and then I'll update you guys and let you know. Maybe you could be part of the watch party.
I will be. I actually have like this far off distant dream that Michaela and I would have a show and we would travel the world and we would try to work with every animal and do every crazy thing possible. And like you said, being comfortable with the uncomfortable. So I'm very excited to see you. Are you going to be a little bit out of your wheelhouse?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah, already in the first episode, there were several instances where I think we said that multiple times. So, yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh. I'm very excited for you. I'm also very excited for Harrison. I know it's been a long time coming for you guys. So
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I guess you can't say the name yet, but when you
I can't. I'm not allowed to. The name is Blue.
I know. Well, you had posted, I don't think Gretel had seen it yet, and you posted something about, I can't remember what it was, but whatever the first post was when you kind of announced that you were working on something, I texted Gretel and I was like, did you see this? And she was like, no, what? And I was like, I don't know what she's talking about. What is she doing? What is this show about? So I was like, we'd already scheduled you to come on. So we were like, obviously we're going to talk about it later,
Yes,
So,
absolutely. And once it's like, further along, we'll come back and maybe I can get Crocker to come on here with me and we'll talk about it. So
yes, we would love to have her. That would be amazing. It would be fun if we had an episode on dealing with the uncomfortable. And
yes.
the Russia replay.
Yeah, exactly. That might be traumatic, but we can do it.
well, one thing that we've started doing, so shout out to Dr. Wade for choosing our question, is we're ending off every episode with kind of like a little positivity boost. We talk about some hard or interesting topics on the podcast, so we end it off by saying, what's bringing you joy today?
Wow, what's bringing me joy today? Well, gosh, being on this podcast, I love visiting with you guys. You guys are the future of the industry, and you're so enthusiastic and fun and optimistic but yet thoughtful about the challenges in front of you. And so that has definitely added joy to my day for sure.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to always talk to you. Actually, all my classmates were like, you're talking to Dr. King, what? I was like, yes, she's amazing. We've actually met in person.
I know. I had posted like a little upcoming guests on the podcast, and one of my classmates reached out to me and was like, I didn't know you had a podcast. And I was like, I've been posting about it since like last March. But
You're the only one that people are like, oh my God, it exists.
It exists. That's right.
So I know
Absolutely.
people are excited about this episode, and thank you again for coming on. I know you definitely, it's such like a, little spark of joy whenever we watch your videos and we're like, yes, we're going to do that someday. And we love what she talks about, and she's such an inspiration. So I know that so many more people are inspired by you than you even think about. So thank you.
Yes. Well, you're welcome. Absolutely. Thanks for that. That means a lot.
But all right, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Dr. King, for coming on. Go check her out at Dr. Emily King on all of the platforms. Facebook, Instagram. I think you're on everything, so go check her out. Make sure to watch her show when it comes out. I'm excited. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time.